The Gaia-X Vision focuses on connecting previously isolated data, having control over one's data, and true transparency of the underlying infrastructure to enable digital sovereignty and making the most of our data. To achieve this, we have to rethink our digital infrastructures. Currently, data are often isolated from each other. For example, you would have data from an engine, from the machine with this engine, and from the factory with this machine, all separated from each other. But we can create substantial benefits if we are able to bring the insights from these data together. So the first challenge we're trying to solve is that we need a mechanism that enables consumers to find offers according to their needs and at the same time allows providers to describe their offers. For example, a company may search for a specific AI service. However, this company has requirements regarding security, geolocation, certification, and sustainability. On the other hand, providers need to describe their services so that consumers can find and select them. The missing piece here is the Gaia-X portal with the trustworthy self-descriptions. In a predefined but extendable framework, providers describe their services and consumers can search a catalog that includes these self-described services to find exactly the one that meets their requirements. So self-descriptions make services and providers transparent and comparable. So consumers could be searching for generic services like compute or storage, or for more specific services like machine learning infrastructure. Providers can describe and offer their services through Gaia-X. Note that Gaia-X itself will not provide services. Instead, it seeks to create a vibrant ecosystem of consumers and providers. Now let's take a look at the current setup of self-description, catalog, and UI. As you may know, Gaia-X is a federated system of services with specific policies and rules, and providers and consumers must follow these rules. All self-descriptions will be stored in a distributed storage system. This storage system can then be used by different catalogs with unique UIs and APIs. In addition, we will also provide a hybrid version of identity and access management with decentralized identity management and OpenID Connect Federation services. What we see here is the current prototypical setup in the community implementation group. In the next minutes, we would like to demonstrate how to use Gaia-X, in particular, how to describe a service as a provider and how to search for a service as a consumer. And for that, I would like to hand over to Pierre.
Thank you, Ronny, for the presentation. And now let's jump into the second part of this video where we will have 4 parts. The first part is about the self-description file and how we are building our community. The second part is about the database, which one did you use and why. The third one about the portal, the UI and how to navigate through the data. And the last one, which is a key aspect of Gaia-X, how we plan to build this chain of trust. Let's start.
Following the high-level overview given previously, here is the presentation of the GitLab repository, which is used by the Gaia-X community to develop the portal. This repository in particular contains the self-description file. The self-description file, that we can also call a manifest, is a description of your service and entity and organization. To submit your manifest or self-description, you will have to open a merge request. The merge request will automatically trigger a pipeline checks. In this pipeline, you will have a syntax check and a shape constraint language checks. Then, before merging into master branch, we will do also quick manual checks to verify that the format complies with the rest of the description that has been submitted before. Now, if we browse the file, you will see that the subscription or manifest are stored in a folder named instance under implementation folders. At the moment, the providers and services folder are the one being used. In the provider folder, you will find the self-description of the providers. We have at the moment 25 provider manifests. In the service folder, you will have the service description for those from those same providers, and we have at the moment 31 service descriptions. Now, if I go through one of those files, I will take the example of Cloud&Heat, which is a virtual description. You will see that there is two sections: mandatory properties, which is the direct translation of the Gaia-X policy and rules into concrete field that must be filled in, and another section with optional properties, where the provider is free to register any additional information in his description of the provider, organization, or services. We need to stress that this implementation is evolving really quickly, and this section of mandatory fields is obviously not the final one. This list of mandatory fields will grow over time to align with our political ambition and make sure that the Gaia-X policy and rules are correctly implemented. Those fields will ensure, for example, that data can be stored and processed in Europe, and this machine-readable file can be demonstrated against tools like the CISPE Code of Conduct. The same demonstration can be done also for the service instances. For example, an AI service where you will have a link from the service to the company that is providing these services. Same thing with mandatory field and with optional field. This collection of provider and services file is being used to populate a database that will power the portal demonstrated a bit later.
And now that we saw what is the raw format, let's see how to use the database. So far we saw what type of file format we want to use and where do we want to store them, how to do the onboarding of people who would like to provide their subscription into the Gaia-X, initial Gaia-X pool of subscription, which is a very good step forward. The next step will be to extract and to load those subscriptions in Catalogue, and the Catalogue will be powered by a database. The type of database that we selected is a graph database, and it enables us to load the subscription, which are triple stored type of data, into a graph. There is an automatic pipeline that every hour loads the latest subscription into the database that is running on a Kubernetes cluster. The Kubernetes cluster itself is deployed on top of a cloud sovereign stack. And I'm going to show you how the raw file that we saw earlier is going to be translated when we open a visualization of what is inside the graph database. Please be noted that the tool we are going to use is specific to this demonstrator, and everyone is welcome to implement their catalog on top of any database of their choice. So once all the data is loaded into the database, we can open a visual representation of the data and generate this type of graph. Here I'm going to look for every triples and display them. At the moment in the database we have about a bit more than 567, if I remember correctly, type of node and attributes. And we can see here that it's not tightly coupled, but we start to distinguish some chain of services that depends from each others, which is the start for growing this Gaia-X community. As a summary, we saw the first part, how we wrote the subscription. We saw how it's presented into a database, a catalog, and now we will have the demonstration of the UI that sits on top of the catalog, and also a bit later, how do we ensure this chain of trust between independent declaration of services and providers. Finally, we will go through the portal and the UI that we've developed. And now the long-awaited Gaia-X portal demonstration. This portal is a catalog of the provider and services self-description that we saw earlier, which are stored at the moment on GitLab. This is a search catalog, and this is not a broker or a scheduler. So all the information that you see in this catalog are not meant to be replacing the integrator or the cloud service provider. As a reminder, Gaia-X is not a cloud service provider and Gaia-X is not a cloud management platform. On the main page, you have a search bar and some news from Gaia-X ecosystem. On the left panel, you have two sections, services and provider. If we go first on the provider panel, you will see the list of all the providers that are currently registered in the database with real data. And you will see also some filter on the left side by location and by headquarter location. The second tab is about services. On the services, as expected, you have the services self-description and information. Same way that for provider, you have a list of filters on the left panel where you can select which output you want to consume, what does it consume for handling the dependencies, and who is providing them. Please note that the results that are displayed are randomly ordered. There is no alphabetical nor preferences. If we take the example that we had earlier for the provider and Cloud&Heat, we see here the same level information in a nicer way. The location, Sweden, certificate, the last update, and the membership date. We also can see right away in this UI the services that are managed by this provider. Here it's a green managed Kubernetes offer. Let's assume that now you want to look for an AI service. You will, of course, be able to see that it's provided by the AI company, that it's GDPR compliant with some description. But more importantly, you will see that the dependency is using. So this AI service is using Cloud&Heat green managed Kubernetes offer. And you click on the small lens here to have more detail. This service, it's its turn, is using secure OpenStack provided by another provider. And here you see that this dependency is also GDPR compliant and has some tag information about the provided service. Doing so, you are able to unroll all the dependencies and check that each of those layers comply with the requested information that you are looking for, and also Gaia-X policy and rules. And we can go as deep as we want. We have here, for example, the data center expectations, and for example, inside the data centers, where are the servers coming from? I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of how you can check the chain of trust that you have when you are going to look and consume a service. More detail about this chain of trust in a few minutes.
Thank you, Pierre. In the Gaia-X philosophy, there can be different Gaia-X catalogs. Using the distributed self-description data, anyone can create a catalog based on a specific target market, in particular application type, or any use case. Here we show one example of such a catalog, which has been built specifically for AI application services in Saxony, Germany. The users can search for an AI application according to their needs. The catalog of AI applications is using a subset of the same self-descriptions used in the catalog which Pierre has just presented. Before the deployment of the application, the user provides the criteria for the underlying infrastructure in terms of location of data processing, location of the provider, certification, or sustainability-related criteria. As you can see, the application selection and the user's filter mechanisms have been implemented in a different way than the main catalog to address the specific use case in this catalog. So, in the Gaia-X ecosystem, various catalogs can coexist to solve specific use cases. Back to you, Pierre.
And to end this session, the last technical bits will be about how do we plan to build this chain of trust. And now we are going to view a very important part of Gaia-X chain of trust. To start this example, let's assume that we have a provider here in green issuing two subscriptions B and C. The issuer will have to sign the subscription claiming those are mine. The next step will be to ensure that the Gaia-X policy and rules are embedded inside those subscriptions through the mandatory field that we saw earlier. If we have another provider here in blue issuing a subscription A, the provider can state that he's depending on provider B and C, and he will also sign his subscription saying, I declare that. As for the other providers, the self-description A will have to comply with the Gaia-X policy and rules through the mandatory field. Last, to verify that this chain can be trusted, we can involve an external third-party certifier that will come and check that the declaration made by those providers comply with actually what's happening in the real world. Then the certifier can sign the self-description A, B, and C, ensuring that they comply with the policy and rules with additional certification, and it can be trusted.